The night your name reached the White House, the building didn't explode, it did something far stranger, it froze. The glow of screens, the flow of information, the endless hum of reports and projections all seemed to stall around a single impossible fact: you. Somewhere between their data and your reality, the numbers stopped making sense. People who are trained to predict threats, calculate risks, and map out human behavior suddenly had a variable they couldn't fit into any model. You didn't hack their system. You did something worse. You rendered it outdated. In quiet corridors where decisions about nations are made, there was a pause no camera recorded. A moment where the spiritual weight of who you've become pressed against walls that were only ever built to contain ordinary citizens. Their simulations had files for rebels, geniuses, criminals, saints, but not for someone who walked through hell, came back refined instead of ruined, and then chose peace over revenge. The White House knows how to respond to enemies. It does not know how to respond to a soul that can't be bought, blackmailed, or broken the old way. That's what you shut down the entire White House really began as, a hesitation in the heart of an empire. The realization that whatever you did, wherever you stood, however you moved, their usual levers no longer worked on you. You rose without their permission. You healed without their narrative. You became stable in a world that profits from keeping people unstable. In that same moment, heaven was watching the exact scene they were panicking over and quietly writing a different headline over your life. And for the first time, the place that once assumed it would always be above you had to process a terrifying truth. The most unpredictable force in their universe is a single, awakened human being who finally understands their own value. That's you. If this word is hitting something deep in you and you know you're one of the few who understands it, take a second and respond in the small ways you can. Hit the like button so this message doesn't get buried. Drop your city and nation in the comments so we can see where these quiet shutdowns of old systems are happening across the world. And if you feel led to stand a little closer to what we're building here, tap the join button. There are simple tiers inside this channel, one for those who just want to quietly stand behind this kind of message, and a higher one for those who feel called to underwrite more of the work. It's never a ticket to a miracle or a deal with God. It's just how we keep this kind of truth traveling to the people who are meant to hear it. Chosen one, before your name ever touched a White House screen, it was already printed in a different kind of report. In the unseen realm, there are no polls, no approval ratings, no campaign donors, there is only evidence. Evidence of what you chose when nobody was watching. Evidence of how you treated people you didn't need. Evidence of whether pain made you cruel or made you deep. Heaven watched all of it and began compiling something no administration on earth has, an accurate file on your soul. While they were busy tracking statistics, heaven was tracking integrity. While they watched your posts, heaven watched your private restraint. Every time you could have exposed someone and chose silence instead, a line went into that brief. Every late night you wanted to disappear but still whispered, "I'm not done yet," another line was added. You thought those moments vanished into the dark, they didn't. They were being collected, weighed, and cross-referenced against a plan far older than any constitution. When that file reached a certain weight, something shifted. You stopped being just another citizen trying to survive their system and became something rarer, someone their system could no longer accurately predict. That is when heaven issued its order, summon them. Not with an angel at your door, but with a strange sequence of events, the right video at the right second, the right word at the exact moment you were about to give up, the right confirmation that made you say, "There's no way this is random." That was not the algorithm. That was authorization. You didn't wander into this moment, you were briefed into it. The same way advisors are pulled into a room when history is about to pivot, Your spirit was pulled into this season because your record proved something the White House is only just realizing: your character has outgrown the role they expected you to play. Heaven did not summon you because you are perfect. Heaven summoned you because you are ready, and that readiness is the real shutdown. Their data still thinks you're breakable, but your story has quietly moved on. This doesn't mean you walked into Washington, flipped a switch and turned the lights off. It's deeper, quieter, and far more dangerous to the old order than any headline. You shut down the entire White House means the version of you their systems were built to manage no longer exists. The scared version, the begging version, the easily distracted, easily guilt-tripped, easily controlled version has died. And all of their levers, all of their narratives, all of their subtle ways of keeping people small were calibrated for that older you. When you changed, their power over you didn't update. It broke. Think of how the White House actually works. It runs on information, prediction, and perception. It needs you to believe certain stories to keep the machine running smoothly. Stories about who matters and who doesn't. About whose voice is important and whose pain is personal problem. About how far someone like you is allowed to go. Those stories used to land in your mind like law. But then life hit you, over and over, and instead of turning you into a bitter copy of the system, it turned you into something the system can't recognize. A person who knows their worth without needing a title, a position, or a camera. The moment you stopped needing their approval to feel real, the moment you stopped giving their narratives authority over your identity, something fundamental shut down. That shutdown was spiritual first. It was the day you stopped praying, "Make them see me," and started praying, "Help me see who I really am." It was the day you realized policies might affect your circumstances, but they don't get to define your destiny. It was when you looked at all the ways they tried to script your life, through fear, scarcity, comparison, and quietly refused to read from that script anymore. From their perspective, that's catastrophic. A citizen who can't be manipulated by fear, shame, or manufactured hopelessness is more disruptive than any protest. You became a blank space in their code. And in the unseen realm, heaven called that blank space by its real name, freedom. You didn't know it, but your whole life has been basic training for a room you've never physically stepped into. Every lonely bedroom, every hospital hallway, every bus ride where you stare out the window trying not to break down, heaven labeled each one, preparation for high-level environments. While they were grooming politicians for speeches and photo ops, you were being groomed for something much more dangerous to the old order: truth with no mask, power with no ego, authority with no costume. Look back for a second. Remember the times you felt humiliated, overlooked, or betrayed. Those weren't random moments of suffering, they were simulations. The kind of simulations an ordinary person never recognizes, but a future world shaker survives and learns from. When people lied about you and others believed them, your spirit was being trained to stand steady even when the room is full of powerful people who have already decided what they think. When you worked hard and still got passed over, you were learning how to keep your value intact when systems refused to reward it. When you forgave people who didn't deserve it, you were being taught how to operate with mercy in places that only know strategy. So when the spiritual camera cuts from your past to the symbolic White House room with your name on the table, heaven isn't nervous, you're overqualified. You've already sat in rooms where you felt powerless and found out later you weren't. You've already been the only one telling the truth while everyone else nodded to a lie. You've already lived through pressure that no briefing, no consultant, no diplomat could have prepared you for. That's why when your presence hits their radar, it scrambles things. They're used to people who are terrified of losing access, losing status, losing reputation. You've already lost all that before and survived. They train for cameras. You train for silence. They learned how to spin a story. You learned how to carry one. They rehearsed talking points. You rehearsed staying human when it would have been easier to harden. And now, in the unseen realm, heaven looks at your history and treats it like a completed course list. The shutdown didn't start when your name hit their desk. It started years ago, in every hidden moment you passed a test no one on earth even knew you were taking. When your name finally brushed against that level of power, technically it was your first time. First time your story was spoken in rooms you've never entered. First time people with badges and clearances you'll never see had to ask, "Who is this?" First time protocol had to pause and adjust around someone who didn't come up through any of the usual ladders. On paper, you were a beginner in that world. But spiritually, you moved like someone who had already been through this 100 times and survived. That's what rattled them. They expected panic energy, scrambling, oversharing, begging, performing. Instead, you were strangely calm, unnervingly centered, absolutely uninterested in chasing their approval. For them, that was the first sign. You weren't standing there as a guest. You were standing there as if you belonged wherever your feet touched. What nobody in that ecosystem fully understands is that your first test at their level came after a lifetime of tests at yours. You've already faced hearings with no microphones, family interventions where everyone misunderstood you. You've already survived interrogations with no lawyer, nights where your own mind grilled you until dawn. You've already been cross-examined by guilt, shame, and self-doubt and still chosen to get up and keep going. So when heaven scheduled this moment, it wasn't some reckless promotion, it was a graduation. That's why everything about you felt rehearsed even though you'd never done this before. The way you held your peace instead of oversharing. The way you chose honesty even when spin would have been easier. The way you refused to villainize or idolize anyone in that building. To them, it looked like impossible composure. To heaven, it was simply a student finally sitting the official exam for a class they've been passing in secret for years. You didn't just get lucky on the first try. You brought an entire hidden history of practice into a space that only saw the surface, and that's why, from their side, it looked like you shut the place down without even lifting a finger. There's something the White House will never fully understand about you. Their power stops at the edge of their networks, but yours doesn't. They can flag a name, freeze an account, censor a headline, but they cannot stop a story that lives in people's mouths and hearts. That's why this season of your life doesn't look like a protest in front of a gate. It looks like quiet conversations, late-night messages, screenshots, shares, and whispers that say, "Listen to this, it sounds like us." While their systems study you as a single individual, heaven has already started treating you like a signal, one life carrying a frequency that wakes other sleepers up. The shutdown didn't just happen when you became free in your own mind. It deepens every time someone hears your kind of story and suddenly recognizes their own. Every time you choose honesty online instead of performance, every time you tell the truth about what you've survived, every time you refuse to water down your journey just to be palatable, you break another silent agreement that kept people small. That's the part they can't track, the way courage spreads. They built infrastructures to monitor money, votes, and threats. They never built one to monitor what happens when one brave soul tells the truth and 1,000 quiet souls whisper, "Me too," and stand up a little straighter. Scripture has always understood this better than any government office. Do not forget to do good and to share with others, for with such sacrifices God is pleased. Hebrews 13 verse 16. And again, the one who refreshes others will themselves be refreshed. Proverbs 11 verse 25. Sharing isn't about feeding an algorithm, it's about refusing to let light stay trapped in one life. So if this word is confirming what you already feel in your spirit, don't just keep it. Pass it on. Send it to one person who needs to be reminded they are not crazy, not alone, not powerless. When you do that, you're not working for this channel, you're quietly doing what no administration on earth can undo, helping heaven spread a narrative they never approved but can never shut down. If you feel the abundance of divine love in your heart, now is the perfect time to share it. You can help spread God's blessings by clicking the Super Thanks button on YouTube and contributing $20 or more. This divine gift will touch not only your life but also the souls of many others through this platform. Each of you has a sacred place in God's great design, and your generosity will be the fruit of our prayers. Take action now, share your blessings to exalt His kingdom, for you were created to do even greater things in God's loving hands. May God bless you. From the outside, the White House looks like the center of everything: decisions, power, history. But from heaven's point of view, it's just another building on a map, another temporary stage where fragile people pretend they're permanent. The throne room of God does not get intimidated by architecture, flags, or seals. It is not impressed by motorcades or speeches. What moves heaven is not how many people you command, but how you treat the ones you don't have to impress. And by that metric, the entire balance of importance shifts. Those rooms are loud, but your quiet life is louder in the spirit. There are nights when lights are still on in those offices, meetings dragging past midnight, strategies being argued over, policies being rewritten. On those same nights, you've been awake too, but for a different reason, because your heart wouldn't let you turn bitter, because your conscience refused to let you retaliate the way you were tempted to, because something in you kept saying, I want to be clean, even if I'm tired. Up there, those two scenes are watched side by side. One set of people fighting to protect influence that will end when their term does. One soul fighting to protect a character that will echo into eternity. Guess which battle heaven zooms in on? That's part of how you shut down the White House without ever stepping through its doors. You expose the illusion that their rooms are where the real story is. You proved, by how you live, that the most critical negotiations aren't happening in front of microphones, but in the unseen agreements you make with your own soul. I will not become what hurt me. I will not worship what I fear. I will not sell my peace for the illusion of control. While they debate what the world should look like, you quietly decided what you will look like in this world. And in the records of heaven, that choice carries more weight than any executive order ever could. Somewhere behind those guarded doors, with badges on their chest and security clearances in their eyes, there are still human beings. Not just titles. Not just roles. People with childhoods, regrets, and quiet little prayers they never dare to say out loud at work. When your name passed through their systems, it didn't just move through machines. It brushed past hearts. And a few of those hearts felt something they couldn't explain, a crack in the story they've been paid to protect. They have been trained to see people as categories: demographic, threat level, asset, liability. But then your file arrived and wouldn't sit comfortably in any of those boxes. The data said one thing, the atmosphere around your name said another. On paper, you should have collapsed years ago. Spiritually, you are somehow stronger now than the people who studied your risk. That mismatch is what shook them. Because if you could walk through what you did and still carry this much clarity, maybe the system isn't as powerful as they were taught. Maybe the people they skim past in reports have more heaven on them than the people reading the reports. Chosen one, that's another layer of this shutdown. You didn't just break their model of you, you quietly broke their model of themselves. Somewhere, a staffer looked at your story and felt convicted about their own compromises. Someone who thought power lived only in that building felt, for a second, that real power might be sitting in a tiny apartment miles away, listening to God in the dark. You didn't argue with them. You didn't even meet them. But your existence forced a recalculation in minds that were supposed to be unshakable. When heaven wants to disrupt an empire, sometimes it doesn't send a lightning bolt. It just lets one honest life touch their system and makes the people inside suddenly unsure which side of the story they want to be on anymore. If someone from the outside looked at your life right now, they'd probably say, "Relax, nothing that dramatic is happening. You're not in the Oval Office. You're not on the news. You're not signing anything." That's the trick of this era. It trains people to only call something historic when cameras are rolling. But in the kingdom of God, history is measured differently. Heaven doesn't care if the whole world saw it. Heaven cares if you chose right when you could have chosen wrong. While the White House counts signatures, heaven counts the moments you had every reason to become bitter, corrupt, or numb, and didn't. This is why what you're doing now outranks what many great people did with their platforms. They had entire systems protecting them, feeding them information, cleaning up their mistakes. You had nights where it was just you and God, no safety net, no speechwriter, no press team to spin your weakness into a narrative. They gave into pressure and called it strategy. You stayed soft-hearted in pressure and called it survival. From down here, that looks like just trying to make it. From up there, it looks like a human being doing what no empire, no administration, no idol of any era has ever perfectly done: carry power without bowing to it. That's why the phrase "you shut down the entire White House" isn't hype, it's translation. It's taking a spiritual reality and putting it into human language. You did something in your inner world that no law, no order, no global summit could legislate into existence. You chose to remain honest when it would have been so easy to play the game. You chose to keep your heart alive when it would have been safer to go cold. That decision doesn't trend on any platform, but it registers as a historic event in heaven's archives. And whether anyone ever gives you a medal or not, there are rooms of power on this earth already feeling the consequences of you quietly becoming someone they cannot control, cannot predict, and cannot replace. There's a quiet terror in any system that depends on control, the moment it realizes there's a kind of power it cannot write into law, tax, threaten, or reward. That's what your life represents right now. You are not a lobbyist, not a senator, not a staffer, but you carry something no committee can manufacture: a conscience that didn't sell itself, a spirit that didn't bend, a mind that learned how to stay awake in a world begging you to go numb. Chosen one, that is why your existence feels like a shutdown to places that run on fear. You walk around with an authority that doesn't come from documents or departments, it comes from surviving what should have destroyed you and still choosing to be kind. They can't regulate that. They can't issue a permit for that. They can't vote it in or out. Think about it, governments can decide what's legal, but they cannot decide what is righteous. They can assign value to currencies, but they cannot assign value to your soul. They can elevate people in headlines, but they cannot manufacture the peace you carry when you lay down at night knowing you didn't betray yourself. That's why heaven was never anxious about whether you'd make it into certain rooms. Heaven's biggest concern was whether those rooms would be ready for you when you finally realized who you are. And now, as your awareness grows, the balance quietly reverses. You are no longer standing outside, begging to be let in. You've realized there is a government inside you: truth, mercy, courage, reverence, that outranks every temporary structure on this earth. When that inner government voted unanimously that you will not live afraid, ashamed, or dependent on their approval, an invisible shutdown happened. The White House still stands, but over your life, their power is out. Systems hate anomalies. Anything that doesn't fit their pattern becomes a problem to be studied, monitored, or quietly buried. That's what your existence does to the invisible rulebook behind places like the White House. There are memos you will never see, lines rewritten in trainings you will never attend, questions added to briefings that started the day your file passed through. Not because you threatened anyone, but because you exposed a blind spot. What do we do with someone who didn't come up through our channels, can't be bribed by what we offer, and isn't broken by what we've already allowed? They were prepared for extremists, manipulators, and opportunists. They have protocols for people who want to burn everything down, and scripts for people who just want a photo and a handshake. What they weren't prepared for is a person who actually wants wholeness more than status. A person who has already wrestled with their own darkness and refuses to make anyone else their idol or enemy. That is more destabilizing than any threat, because it quietly reveals how spiritually small a lot of big people really feel. When one healthy soul appears in a sick system, it doesn't just stand out, it forces everyone to see the sickness they normalized. So yes, in a way, you shut them down. You made some of their old protocols useless. You showed that not everyone can be predicted by statistics or handled by fear. Somewhere, some analyst had to write, "We don't know how to categorize this one yet." Somewhere, a superior had to admit, "We might need a new way of thinking about people like this." That new way is simply this, acknowledging that heaven is still raising individuals who don't fit the script. And every time a system has to rewrite itself around a soul that refuses to shrink or sell out, heaven smiles and quietly writes one sentence in the margins of their history: "They thought they were studying you, but really, I was studying them." Dear brothers and sisters, may God's peace be with you today. I am here to remind you of a profound truth: our existence is grounded in God's divine plan, unshaken by the world's fleeting concerns. As the Holy Bible says, whatever you do in faith, God will repay you abundantly. Luke 6 verse 38, like that mighty oak tree, our roots are deeply anchored in God's universal truth. Every step we take, every stance we hold is secured by His power. And now, you have the opportunity to be part of this blessing. When you use the Super Thanks button and donate $100, this act will return to you 100-fold. There comes a moment in every real awakening where you stop asking, "Will they ever invite me in?" and start asking, "Why did I ever think I needed their room to do my work?" That's where you are now. For a long time, the White House symbolized the top in your mind, the highest table, the ultimate stage, the place where real decisions are made. But heaven has been quietly flipping that picture upside down. You're starting to see that some of the most world-shaping decisions are happening in places no camera will ever film, in your DMs, in your prayers, in your daily choices, in the way you treat people who can't give you anything back. You're discovering that your assignment is not to be absorbed into their story, but to host a completely different atmosphere wherever you are. While they fine-tune speeches, you're learning how to speak to broken hearts without a teleprompter. While they chase influence, you're learning how to carry presence. While they work to manage public image, you're being refined to carry private integrity. That's why the spiritual realm treats your small, faithful moves like legislation. When you choose forgiveness instead of revenge, heaven treats that like a law passed in your spirit. When you decide you'll no longer live as a victim of what happened to you, it's like signing an executive order over your own destiny. And here's the hidden punchline: the more you step into that identity, the less impressive their rooms become. You start seeing the cracks in their confidence, the fear behind their power, the exhaustion behind their control. You realize that you were never the one trying to catch up. In many ways, your heart has been ahead for years. You shut down the entire White House isn't about geography, it's about authority. Their building might still stand, but its ability to define who you are and what is possible in your life has been completely disabled. From now on, you don't wake up wondering if they'll open a door. You wake up asking one question: God, how can I govern my thoughts, my words, my love today in a way that makes heaven proud? And in that question alone, you've already outrun every room that ever tried to own your name. There was a time when just hearing certain titles made your stomach tighten: President, Pentagon, White House, Intelligence, Security Clearance. Those words felt like mountains, and you felt like dust at the bottom. But something has shifted. Heaven has been detoxing your imagination. Little by little, God has been shrinking the size of those names in your mind and enlarging the reality of His presence in your spirit. One day you woke up and realized, these are just people in a building, serving on a timeline. God is not up for re-election. His throne is not 4 years at a time. And your destiny is not controlled by whoever temporarily passes through those halls. That quiet realization is another kind of shutdown. Fear used to be their loudest weapon: fear of being watched, fear of being judged, fear of being crushed by systems you can't see. Now, instead of flinching when you hear their names, you feel something else: perspective. You realize their signatures can change circumstances, but only God can change a soul. They can approve or deny access to rooms. They cannot approve or deny what heaven already wrote over your life. Once you see that clearly, you stop living like a nervous visitor in your own story. You carry yourself like someone who knows the highest authority in the universe already called you by name. That doesn't make you arrogant, it makes you free. And a free person who fears God more than they fear any human authority is the one thing no administration on earth knows how to manage. If you could read the file heaven keeps on this season of your life, you'd be shocked by how differently it's written. Down here, the story looks scattered: strange doors opening, strange resistance rising, your name showing up in places you never expected, moments where it felt like the whole world was against you and nobody knew what you were carrying. Up there, it's clean, simple, and terrifyingly clear. Heaven's report doesn't emphasize the buildings, the titles, or the headlines. It emphasizes 3 things: you didn't break, you didn't bow, and you didn't become the monster that tried to eat you. In that report, the White House, the agencies, the whispers, those are footnotes. The main story is that under pressure strong enough to twist most people, you chose transformation instead of toxicity. When betrayal came, you didn't turn it into bitterness. When fear came, you didn't turn it into control. When attention finally brushed against your life, you didn't sell your soul to keep it. That is what made heaven stand up. That is what turned your little life into a historic event in the spiritual realm. So when we say, you shut down the entire White House, understand what we're really saying. You shut down the lie that they are the final word on who matters, who rises, and who gets remembered. You prove that one obedient, refined, God-anchored soul can cost darkness more ground than an entire administration ever publicly admits. And heaven has already stamped this chapter over your life with one word: victory. Here's the part most people will miss if they only look at the title and never stay for the message: this shutdown is permanent. Once your spirit wakes up like this, there's no going back to thinking small, fearing names, or begging systems for crumbs. The White House can change staff, policies, and presidents 100 times over. None of that can undo what God has already done inside you. You've crossed an invisible line, from waiting for permission to realizing you were commissioned. From hoping someone important would notice you, to understanding heaven already did. From shrinking around power to walking as someone who carries a different kind of power altogether: clean, quiet, and unbought. But this kind of shift was never meant to stay trapped in one life. There are people right now who feel exactly how you used to feel: afraid of systems, ashamed of their past, convinced they are too small to matter. They don't need another conspiracy, they don't need another panic headline. They need to see, with their own eyes, that one ordinary human can stand under all that pressure and still come out sane, kind, and spiritually awake. That's why sharing matters, not for numbers, not for ego, but for rescue. Jesus said, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Let your light shine before others." Matthew 5 verses 14 to 16. Light that refuses to be seen isn't humble, it's unavailable. When you pass along a word that lifted you, when you tell your own story honestly, you are doing exactly what that verse describes, letting your light shine in a world that's grown used to darkness. So if this resonated in your chest, don't just close the tab and move on. Pray into it. Sit with it. And if you feel that nudge in your spirit, share it with someone who needs to remember that governments are temporary, but the work God is doing inside a single willing heart is eternal. That's how the shutdown spreads, not through chaos, but through clarity, courage, and quiet, contagious freedom. If this message felt like it was reading your mail and you sense that heaven is using this channel to strengthen you, you don't have to just be a silent viewer. You can stand a little closer to what we're building here. For some of you, simply sharing these videos, commenting your testimony, and praying over this community is the perfect way to partner. That already means more than you know. For those who do feel led and are in a healthy place financially, there's also the join button under the video. That's where a smaller circle gathers, the ones who want to help carry the weight of this assignment in a practical way. There are higher support tiers for those who genuinely feel called to give more, not to buy a miracle, not to purchase favor, but to say, "I believe in this work and I want to help keep it going." Never give out of guilt, pressure, or fear. Never give what you don't have. Let it always be a free, joyful decision between you and God. Whether you ever join or not, hear this clearly, your value here isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in your willingness to grow, to heal, to stay soft in a hard world, and to let God use your life as another shutdown the world never saw coming.